Hello and welcome to IPSE Live and a happy National Freelancers Day. Today we'll be talking about what the day means with George Anastasi, who's Policy Development Manager at IPSE, Marta Stelmacek and Rebecca Stevenson, who are both finalists in the 15 for 2015. That's a competition to find Britain's best self-employed person, the grand final of which is tonight at the LSO St Luke's in Tech City. First of all, congratulations to both of you for being selected. Marta, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got into freelancing?
Thank you. Yes, I work as a Polish-English translator and interpreter, and I combine my language skills with the business background that I had to help Polish and British businesses do business together in the UK or in Poland. And I started freelancing straight after I finished university. So I did my BA in Applied Translation here in the UK and went straight into working.
So you've never had a permanent job, straight into freelancing?
No, straight into freelancing.
That's interesting. And Rebecca, what about you?
Yeah, so I did a few years in industry just because I'm a handbag designer, so it's quite specific, handbag, luggage, fashion accessories. And yeah, it was quite important for me to get a bit of sort of experience around it, like, because a lot of people are kind of like, oh, where have you worked? So you kind of needed that.
That reputation really gets you your,
and it was helpful for then networking. But yeah, in the creative industries, freelancing is pretty prolific. So
was it always an aim of yours to sort of go
freelance? It kind of felt quite natural, yeah. And I do, yeah. It was kind of what I was.
For, I mean, Marta, for you, I mean, as I said, the competition's nationwide. There were hundreds and hundreds of entries, and you were selected as one of the final 15, which obviously is a great sort of boost for what you're doing. But can you sort of put your finger on what it was exactly that stood out in terms of your entry? Why you were selected? Do you think?
I think that one of the main reasons why this happened is that the industry I come from, the translation and languages industry, has seen a really major change in the past, I would say, 10 or maybe even 5 years, when many of the in-house positions disappeared, and there was a huge, even almost a paradigm shift of how people work within this industry, and that really posed quite a lot of challenges in how people rediscover themselves and how they make their own workplaces and how they find clients and how they find jobs. And a part of what I'm doing, apart from, of course, working as a translator and interpreter, is trying to help my colleagues who also work in the same industry set up their businesses, develop their businesses, and really rediscover their professional identities in this new landscape.
That's interesting because some might say that they're your competitors. So you're working to help your industry and your competitors to sort of do well. Is that philanthropic from your point of view, or does it help your business?
I think it's very important for all freelancers in all industries to understand that we are not competing, because every single person as a freelancer is really bringing their own individual values, the added value, the additional element that we are giving to our clients. And the services I deliver are totally different from the services that my colleagues may be delivering. So I don't see them as competitors. Quite on the contrary, I think that the better we do as individuals, the better the whole profession stands. So I think it's similar for all freelancers, because I think this is our main strength, that we are bringing in something so individual and so special that we're not competing with each other.
That's interesting. And I suppose, Rebecca, for you, what you do is much more visual. So do you think it was your actual designs that caught the eye, or how your business works?
I think it's a combination. Like, I'm always grafting for new work. I feel like it's part of my job, really.
The marketing aspect of it.
Yeah, and like networking and researching people that you kind of have to sort of set it up for yourself. Like, who do I want to sort of notice me? So using the internet, it's pretty well, not easy, but you just got to put time into it.
That visibility was handy and good for your work, and also
definitely
things like the competition will obviously help with that.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting.
Yeah, so it is a combination. Like, people always want to ask me who I've worked with before, or
your track record.
Yeah, so like, I don't know, there's this funny thing about sort of when it's a visual thing, and when someone's employing who's not visual, they don't really know, they kind of want to see exactly what you've done before, even though you're like, I'm quite adaptable, I'm quite creative.
Yeah,
I can
they want
do
to see something
whatever
that they like.
Yeah, they're like, but do you have this? And I'm like, I haven't done exactly, but I can do it for you. Trust me.
Okay. Trust me.
Yeah.
George, it's National Freelancers Day. We woke up this morning to hear that the government has appointed an MP to the role of Ambassador for Self-Employment. Give us a bit of background about how that came about. It's great news, but how did that come about?
So I'll tell you about National Freelancers Day first. We've been doing it for about 6 years now. It started as a day to kind of celebrate the contribution the self-employed and freelancers make to the economy. If you work as self-employed, you can be quite isolated. You work from home. There's no real focal point in the calendar to kind of celebrate what you do and get together with other people that work in a similar way to you and highlight your contribution to the economy. It's also a way of raising awareness for decision makers, the powers that be, politicians, about the contribution that freelancers make to the economy. And on that basis, we've been working to do that for years now. And as we get closer and closer to an election, we've been working very hard with the government and we suggested in our manifesto, this lovely document here,
product
which
placement.
you can download from our website, that there should be a minister or a representative for self-employment sitting within the Department for Business. So what the government have announced today, which is great news, is that there'll be a freelance czar, which is David Morris MP, who will be the voice of freelancers within government, which is really good news because we've now got that focal point we needed. Beforehand, we used to have a minister for small business, which obviously is a totally different thing to freelancers.
It often gets sort of conflated into one.
That's right. So you say SME, small medium-sized enterprise, that can be a business with up to 250 people in it, whereas a freelancer is one person working for themselves, working very hard for themselves, and they'll have a completely different set of needs to that larger business. So it's really good news that that's been announced. Yeah,
I mean, it's great. I mean, I think obviously we're hearing from these two, and they're saying how they're working really hard for themselves, by their very nature, obviously very independent. Do you still think that there are things that can be done for people that are so used to going out and doing things for themselves? Do you still think there's a need for them to have that support there? There's so much that governments can do to help the self-employed. That's why we wrote a manifesto. One of the main things we're interested in is getting maternity pay for the self-employed. At the moment, if you're self-employed, you receive less money than an employee would, should you choose to be pregnant. So that's something the government's actually looking at. That's another thing they've announced today, is that they will consider doing that. Some people might say, though, that, I mean, the maternity pay is paid by your employer. So if you're freelance, you don't have an employer as such, or people might not think so. So how's that going to work in practice? I mean, is it the same thing? I mean, will that come out of taxpayers' money? How does that work? It's very similar. So maternity pay at the moment for employees comes from the taxpayer. So although it's your employer that might pay it if you're an employee, they eventually claim that money back, or most of it back, from the government. So what we're saying is, although if you're self-employed, you don't have an employer, you should be able to claim the same amount of money because
back
you're paying
the
tax.
So basically what it'd be is the first 6 weeks that you're able to claim maternity pay, that'd be at 90% of what you normally earn. And currently that isn't possible if you're Currently that's not possible. You get a fixed, quite low amount, so you're really disadvantaged if you're self-employed. There's also other policies in our manifesto on issues like late payment. We think the rules around that should be a lot tougher, so that if you're paid late, you can issue fines or avoid having to go to court, and you've got powerful tools at your disposal, like, say, a conciliation service, to punish those who pay you late. There's also issues in there on pensions. We think that that's another major gap that I know the government is thinking of looking at, as is the Labour Party. So there's a whole suite of issues in here, in this manifesto, that address some of the issues that the self-employed face. I think, obviously, you're sort of working day to day in Westminster, talking to all these people. Marta, you're out in the world doing business. You're not necessarily quite so close to that. Is it as important in practice when you're out there doing your thing? You're not in Whitehall, you're not in Westminster, that's not your day job. Is it as important to have that backing from Parliament, or do you think, well, we'll let them get on with it and I'll go and make my own way? Is it important to you?
I think it definitely is important. Issues such as maternity pay, or even sick payment, or your pension. I think these are the things that when we're so busy carrying on our business, looking for new clients, I think it would be really good to know that somebody's taking care of us and somebody's providing for these issues, so that we can safely concentrate on doing business and on making money, rather than being worried about these issues that will catch up on us at some point.
Rebecca, I mean, you've heard, like, George's gone through a few different issues there. If you could pick out one thing as a freelancer that worries you more than anything else, and you'd like some, if you've got one thing above all else that really sort of keeps you awake at night. Apart from getting work, because they can't help you with that. You're going to have to do that.
I think, some of the issues you mentioned definitely things that I think about. Also, it's not something I've sort of had to do yet, but things like mortgages I know can be really difficult for freelancers. And I'm not in the position for that yet, but I'd like to think at some point it's not going to be an impossible sort of thing in the future. But I know it can be. Like, I know that mortgages can be really difficult if you don't have a permanent job.
Yeah, the whole perception of what a job means.
And also the pension thing, definitely.
They're the two main areas. I mean, they are the two areas, George, where if you looked at the perception of work and what people think of as a job and security, I mean, they're the two areas that are probably most affected by that. I mean, are they two areas that you think we're likely to see change in?
I think so. Both the main parties, Labour and Conservative, are taking that very seriously. We've been at meetings with them talking about both of those things in quite a lot of detail. So I think there will be movement on that, because obviously if you become self-employed, you're taking on a lot of risk. And you want that's fair in some ways, but not in others. And you want the level of risk that you're taking on to be minimised to a point where you think, actually, I can do this. I do want to go out on my own, and I'm not losing out a lot. And mortgages is one area where, it's an aspiration of many people to own their own home, and it doesn't seem fair that it should be more difficult for a self-employed person. So, yeah, I expect to see action on that in the coming months as we get closer to an election. Yeah.
Especially when I suppose you think that a job for life doesn't really exist anymore, even if you are in permanent employment. So if your contracts are not that much shorter than other people's jobs might be. So it's about perception rather than anything else, I suppose.
I think sometimes it may be even easier for freelancers, because we work with, we have usually portfolios of clients. So even if one of them drops out, you still have income. Once your job, you're left with nothing, sometimes for months.
That's a really interesting point, actually. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about some of the issues, which is all, might cause slightly more negative, but I mean, obviously you two have both chosen this way of working. You're doing really well at it. More and more people are doing that. I mean, more and more people are choosing to freelance. Have you noticed probably a question for you, Martha, have you noticed over the last kind of couple of years, have you noticed that out there in the real world that there are more people doing it, there's more people understanding it as a way of working?
Definitely, I think so. And I also noticed in the number of people who sometimes write to me asking for advice, saying that they would like to get into self-employment in my industry. I think that the numbers are really rising, and I think that people really are turning to this particular form of working. And I noticed that especially among university graduates, more and more of them decide to go into self-employment, into freelancing straight after they finish.
I mean, obviously, it was, as you said, it was always the way you envisaged working. Rebecca, you started at it slightly later. Was it still always the way you wanted to work, or did it just come about?
It kind of it kind of fell into place. But yeah, like I said before, it's something that, as a designer, it's done a lot. But I really wanted. My industry's so competitive. You have to have a bit of sort of solid.
Personal
yeah. And people look at your CV and go, well, who have you worked for?
So you had to get that in.
Yeah, I think it's, Okay. And I worked for free quite a lot when I was
That's an interesting point, actually. That's an interesting point, because there's arguments, really sort of quite passionate arguments, both for and against that. Some freelancers say, never ever. Others say...
kind of before, sorry.
Yeah, others say, do it because it's a great way of marketing yourself. I mean, what's your view? Do you think it's...
I did it because as a fashion student, it was like, kind of had to do it. I think things are changing a bit now. Like, it's not kind of approved by the government. I don't think the free sort of long-term internships. But these days, I don't do anything.
So you
for
just
free.
say no?
I just say I can't afford to, and I haven't got time.
Is that
and then they kind of respect that in a way, because they're like, oh, you're a professional. I don't want to waste. Sometimes if these websites like People Per Hour are great, but you get so much competition. They're almost, I think. They kind of say, oh, can you just do a little bit? And I feel like they're getting 10 people to do a little bit and then mashing it together, possibly.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting that you mention it, because it's also similar to what's sometimes happening in my own industry.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we get the feeling that different clients just go around and ask
just see what they can get
for a little bit for free as a sample, and then they just mash it up
and then you never hear again.
A product that they can use later on. So this is also
Definitely.
something that we've noticed, and that's why we're also trying just to talk to our colleagues to make them aware of it, and not to work for free in this capacity, because it can be used for commercial purposes, for somebody's gain later on.
That's interesting. I think, as you say, it's an issue that it only really works if everyone's working from singing from the same hymn sheet. If you're taking a stance and no one else is, well, they'll still get the work done. So it's about that consistency. So that's slight change of topic, but we're looking at the figures, and there's been more ONS stats out this morning about the rise in the way people choosing self-employment, also the amount people are getting paid for doing so. And one thing in the last year that's been consistent is that the biggest growth area is in the rise of self-employment is among women, and it's actually outstripping women going into traditional employment. So more and more women are choosing to work in this way, more than they're even choosing traditional employment, and now they make up almost half of all freelancers, when that number's not nearly as high for traditional employment when compared to men. So, I mean, what would be your sort of guess as to why that might be? Is it work life? Is it more, more professionalism? What do you think that is?
Well, I think that one of the reasons why this is happening is the flexibility that freelancing allows for. So I suppose also for me, I can build my life and my work in the way exactly I want them to be built, and I wouldn't be able to do that in traditional forms of employment. Also for me individually, choosing freelancing really allows all of my best skills together, and I know that I wouldn't be able to combine them in this way in traditional employment, because the roles that I would have been offered would be pretty much restricted. So I wouldn't be able to put everything, all of my skills to work towards my own business. So I think that may be also one of the reasons that we have, as women, we have some skills that when they are put together, they help us grow the business. And I also think that as women, we are very good when it comes to customer relationships, and that also helps us maintain the clients that we get over longer periods.
I think one of the main issues when it comes to women in work is the gender pay gap, and the sheer difference between what men get paid and what women get paid doing the same job in traditional employment. All sort of research suggests that isn't quite the same in freelancing, that the levels are much similar. Do you think, or do you find ever that you're sort of treated differently as a woman in what you do? Has it ever come up? Is it not something you've ever experienced?
No, to be honest, no, not really. I think if to generalise, I guess women are quite good at doing several things at once.
No cliche, yeah.
Yeah, so because you're doing everything, aren't you? Sort of being your own business.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think maybe we're quite good at juggling, but yeah, so I don't think it's been a really, I've never been a man, so I don't know.
Same with that. And I think, for you, George, you're the policies in the manifesto. The vast majority are for pretty much everyone that works in this way, and I suppose we've talked about maternity pay. That's the overriding thing that would be sort of gender specific. But does obviously paternity pay is there's some stats out today about that, and a lot of men, 8 out of 10 men use holiday pay to cover the paternity. Is that something that's also involved?
That's something that's also in there. Yeah. It's interesting you talk about the pay gap. There is research on this, quite detailed research, that shows that the pay gap is a little bit smaller. It's still there for whatever reason, but it does seem to be smaller in freelancing, and we don't know why, and it's quite interesting to kind of look into that. But yeah, there's policies for everyone. The biggest growth in freelancing has been amongst women, amongst 18 to 24s, and amongst 60 plus. So 3 very specific groups. So we've geared everything in the manifesto towards those 3 groups. So yes, it's for everyone, but we've got to recognise that there's 5 million people working for themselves now in the UK, or almost 5 million. So the new entrants to that kind of arena of working for themselves are the ones that we want to help the most, so that they've got the right support they need to continue working in that way without feeling that they're at a lot of risk, and feeling that they can grow their business if they want to, or carry on working the way, working for themselves if they want to do that.
It's interesting you mentioned the older people that are going into freelancing. That's all about how people work and life blending together, and maybe doing something that you enjoy, so you don't want to stop in the same way you might if you're in a permanent job. It's a long way off for both of you, but do do you see sort of work always being part of your life in that way, or are you thinking about?
If I'm enjoying it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also by then you've got so much experience, you could probably earn quite well as well. So, and you'll have people from your career that you can pick and choose. Probably.
Sure.
It's probably quite nice just to do
exactly
what you want to do.
Shame to stop at that point.
Say no to anything you don't want to do.
Yeah, exactly. You can be much more selective when it comes to the jobs that are coming your way, and I think that it's also a very good way of really continuing to be active and to really keep on doing what you're passionate about.
Do you see? I mean, this is another thing from a manifesto, but it'd be interesting to get your views on it as people out there doing it. But we talk a lot about training and keeping your skills up to date. You know, no one's there kind of supporting you in doing that like you might get if you're an employee. Do you spend a lot of time doing that and thinking about what you might be doing in the future and in 5 years' time and expanding your portfolio, or do you sort of think, well, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm good at, I'm sticking to this? I mean, what do you?
Yeah, go on.
I'm a big fan of 5-year-long plans, so I always have a plan for my business, and training is a very important part of it. I would say that I spend between 15 to 20% of both my time and money on training further, either at what I'm already good at or developing into further areas, so taking up courses on online marketing or search engine optimization, which are not primarily linked to the core of my business, but I still need to know about them. So I'm definitely planning that long term, and I really also know that my job is influenced by all the developments, innovation, new technology, so I really need to be up to date and know which way I'm going to go forward. So it is definitely a very important part for my business plan.
What about you, Rebecca?
Yeah, I mean, you're always kind of researching, and I kind of feel like I teach myself some things, especially on sort of finance side, or because you obviously do all your own invoicing. And stuff. At the beginning, I found that like as a creative maybe a bit more sort of
doesn't place your strengths.
I felt a bit clueless at the beginning, but yeah, I'm fine with it now. But yeah, you kind of notice like with certain jobs there might be things where they ask you, can you do this as well, and then you go, oh, maybe. And then if that same thing comes up a few times, you think kind of maybe that's something I should look into. There's actually, because I concentrate on the design side, I sometimes get asked to do sort of the first sort of draft pattern of a construction of a bag or things like that, which I don't feel confident in. But I have been thinking recently maybe to do a sort of evening class or a short course on that. And if I won the 15 for 15, that's something that I would put the money towards.
That's what you'd be looking to put the money towards.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
For the career.
Not a holiday then, straight back into the career.
Business.
That's what we like to hear. George, I see you're dying to come in on the training stuff. I mean, is there anything we can do to support on that? There's
a lot we can do. I mean, it's as you say, training is something that you're entirely responsible for. There's no employer pushing you saying maybe it'd be good if you learned this, and then as a result, any time you spend training is time you could be working. So it's kind of, that often puts a lot of people off who are self-employed from training. So one of the ways that we think could help is changing the tax treatment of training for the self-employed. At the moment, I'm an employee. If my employer needs me to learn something new, they can put me on a course or whatever, and they can deduct that from tax. As a self-employed person, if you want to learn a new skill, you can't do that. That doesn't seem fair to me, and I think that's something that can hopefully change. And I'm hoping that all the main parties in Westminster will agree to do that. So that's one of the main things we can do. We've also got to look beyond courses as well for the self-employed. So often there's things like online training and things like that that people might not be aware of, and that the government can have a greater role in pushing out to the self-employed. So yeah, there's loads we can do in that area, and it's a huge area for the self-employed.
Okay. Well, you've just sort of you've answered my next question before I've asked it, but I mean, like I said, the competition, the final is tonight. You've already made the last 15, so you get kind of your business support and all that stuff for that. But there is £5,000 up for the winner, so and 2,000 for each of the two runners up. Yep. So yeah, so I'm sure you didn't know that. What would you spend it on, Marta, if you did win?
If I win tonight, I would like to spend this money on developing my courses for other freelancers further, because I really think that maybe not only my translation and interpreting colleagues, and this is something I was thinking about. I could put a word forward to reach out further to other people who work with languages, such as journalists and writers, for whom also the whole landscape has changed. So with this money, I would be able to expand the portfolio of courses I'm delivering and reach out to other people who are either out of jobs for now or are struggling as freelancers, and really help them boost their business.
Get back into it. Okay, and for you, it would be diversifying your skill set, I suppose.
There's courses I've got my eye on, so. And also, I rent a desk in like a shared studio, and it would make sure that I can still do that. Like, for me, that's a really important thing.
To you
I used to be so isolated working at home. That's a real downside for me, because I feel like I'm still quite a people person, so I love having meetings or just being around other creatives, even if they're not doing exactly the same thing.
Sure.
So yeah, it would just make sure that I can do that for the foreseeable. Would be great.
And that's I mean, as you said, you both out there, you're successful at what you're doing, your profile's high. If there's people watching that are thinking about getting into freelancing, and they're sort of looking at National Freelancers Day and thinking, oh, you know, maybe that's for me. Martha, I'll start with you. What one piece of advice would you give them as sort of the thing to really think about, or to get prepared before they make the jump?
I think it's very important to really look at yourself first and assess whether you're made for it, because it's great in terms of the benefits. You have the flexibility, the opportunity to really make the most of who you are and what you can do, but at the same time it really requires a lot of courage and a lot of thinking and planning ahead. So I don't think it's a decision that, you know, it's the National Freelancers Day, you decide today, quit your job tomorrow. Exactly. I think it really requires an honest look at whether you can do it, whether you have enough strength in you as a person to really look at all the risks possible and answer whether you are prepared to handle it, whether you are ready to go through all of these risks and all of these things that could go wrong. And I think that the moment you look at it and make a really conscious decision, I think that making this conscious decision is a very important element in deciding. And I think that if all freelancers who are freelancing now or future freelancers really did that self-assessment first, that would have helped them much better. Because thinking about it, but you're not quite sure, if you look at all the risks, then maybe, you know, you'll find areas you can develop, find areas you can grow or get further training, like invoicing. I think that problems concerns many freelancers. So if they look at it a little bit earlier on, before they make the jump, then they are so much better prepared. So I think assessing your situation and assessing who you are and how well you're fit to become a freelancer is a very important step.
Self-analysis.
Yeah.
I think you need to be really passionate about what you're actually doing, because for me it took probably a good 18 months to actually feel stable, and it's just like you just have to keep grafting and go, okay, I'm gonna have enough work every day pretty soon. But at the beginning it doesn't just like drop in your lap. So
it's not seamless.
Yeah, if people can start looking into what they want to do while they're in employment, or go part-time while they're starting out, maybe that's a good way in, but it's not overnight. It wasn't for me anyway. So
well, thank you very much for that, and good luck for this evening.
Thank you
for watching, and that's all we've got time for this episode of IPSE Live. You can check back in to the live stream from 7 o'clock this evening, where all the proceedings from the LSO St Luke's in Tech City will be live online for you to watch, and next time in December for the next episode of IPSE Live. Goodbye for now.